And now Matthias and Gerlinde, both from ABA, will tell you why Austria is a good place for R&D. And then Florian Laure, he's a senior tax manager at Deloitte, will explain why your finance people will love this idea too.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome from beautiful Vienna. My name is Matthias, and together with my colleague Gerlinde, we will be introducing the research location Austria to you. Get the slides up, please. First, let's have a very quick glimpse on the industries of Austria. Machinery is by far the biggest one, making up 25% roughly of the Austrian industry. Electronics will be number 2, vehicle production at around 10%, number 3, and chemicals also around 10% will be number 4, food the last one, number 5. What do all of these have in common, especially the first 4? That is that they're very R&D intensive. Meaning, if you want to be successful in these industries, you really have to invest in research and development. And that is also shown on the next slide here, which basically shows you how Austria, the research and development expenditure here, how it was raised since the year 2000 compared to the EU. So you can see that on average in the EU, R&D expenditures were raised by 16%, but at the same time in Austria, they were actually raised by 66%, and they were totaling almost 13 billion last year, which is quite an astonishing number indeed. This becomes even more visible when you look at the research quota, which basically means R&D expenditures in contrast to the GDP of a nation. And here you can see that Austria actually ranks second within the EU, only beaten by Sweden. And that other big industrial nations, as for instance Germany, France, or the United Kingdom, they would be quite far below Austria. And there's one reason for that, or one of many reasons for that, and that is because Austria has a very strong R&D funding. And I'm now going to pass on to my colleague Gerlinde, who's going to tell you more about the R&D funding in Austria.
Thank you, Matthias. Good morning, everybody, and also welcome from my side. We already heard a lot about the strengths of the business location Austria. Let's have a look now on the funding system and how it works. Austria focuses very much on innovation and technology and offers, for that reason, a comprehensive system of public funding and support measures to companies and foreign investors. There are programs for investment, in growth investments, for research and development, for environmental projects, for internationalization and export, and a lot more. These programs are aimed primarily for SME companies, startups and R&D companies, but also for mid-caps and large enterprises. Those fundings are available on a federal level, but all the 9 regions also have their own programs on a regional level. Besides that national promotion measures, additional financial assistance through EU programs is also available. The most important funding sources in Austria, because the funding system is very diverse and well received by the business community, is based on the following institutions. It's AWS, Austria Wirtschaftsservice, which is the promotional bank for corporate business development. AWS supports companies by offering funding in terms of state guarantees, soft loans, and grants, especially for growth and innovation projects for SME and mid-caps. The focus there clearly goes towards state guarantees. Whereas the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, named FFG, promotes R&D projects along the entire innovation chain via research grants. Funding is offered for Austrian-based companies, for research institutions, or researchers in all phases of technology, development, and innovation. Its aim is to strengthen the competitiveness of those companies by funding the development of new products, new processes, or new services. Another agency is the Austrian Science Fund. That's the country's central body for the promotion of basic research. There are also fundings for environmental projects through grants by KPC Kommunalkredit. And in addition, as already said, there are the 9 regional agencies. They all have their own programs, which normally can be also combined with the federal funding. Let's have a look into R&D funding. At FFG, the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, companies can apply at any time for the general program that is fundamentally based on the bottom-up principle. So it's open 365 days a year. It's open to all branches of industry and research and eligible for companies and projects of all sizes. FFG uses a combination of several financing instruments, such as non-repayable grants, as well as subsidized low interest loans. Besides the general program, FFG offers also specific programs and calls covering future-oriented topics, high technology and cooperative R&D projects, based in this case on the top-down principle. To get a little bit more practical, let me illustrate the overview between R&D funding and investment project funding. Generally spoken, the company has to present a project to the funding banks, which has to be submitted before the project starts. All applications now have to be transmitted online. For an investment project with AWS, for instance, the eligible costs would be machinery, equipment, but also intangible assets. And the maximum obtainable in such an incentive is approximately 20% of the project costs for a medium-sized company. To give you also an example, the success rate to obtain a state guarantee with AWS is 90%, so this is a pretty high score. In comparison, at R&D projects with an FFG funding application, you can also put as eligible costs labor costs, which normally is a very big part of the project cost, but also equipment and material. Funding for such an R&D project goes up to 50% of the project costs. For startups, even up to 70%. And the funding normally is a mix between non-repayable grants and soft loans. Now, Matthias will give you an overview, give you some examples of international companies that already have chosen Austria to set up an R&D center here or invested in research and development.
Thank you very much, Gerlinde. So the first example I chose is a company from Asia. This is the region I work with, so obviously I chose an example from there to start with. It's a company called Great Wall Motors. I think many of you will know it. It's a very innovative company, a car manufacturer, but very strong with e-mobility. And they actually opened the first R&D center outside of China in Austria. And they were citing its excellent location, but also a very good access to talent here in Austria as reasons to come here. Second example I chose is Infineum, a German semiconductor producer, one of the largest in the world. And they just invested 1.6 billion euros in a new project here in Austria. And next to this amount, what is also quite astonishing is that they invested it in a region that's actually known for tourism, for its beautiful landscape. So this is a very good example of how very high quality of life can be perfectly combined with high-tech industry here in Austria. The last example I chose is Takeda, a company from Japan that might not be known to everyone, but they are one of the world's biggest producers of pharmaceuticals. And they currently employ more than 4,500 people in Austria at 3 different locations. And I've just read this week that they're taking in 100 new people over the next 1 to 2 months, even though, of course, the economy is not that strong worldwide. So this is really a clear example of how successful that investment here is. Takeaways from that session. What do we want you to take away from our presentations? First, Austria is a very strong industrial location. It offers excellent possibilities for R&D for international companies. And one of the reasons it can do that is because it's got a very strong and very unique funding system. One part is the direct incentives that Gerlinde just told you about. The second part is the indirect incentives, and we call that the research premium. And what it basically means is that 14% of everything you spend, you're going to get back from the Austrian state via a tax credit in cash. And I would now like to invite Florian and Laure from Deloitte to come on stage and give you some more details on how that works.
Thank you very much, Mathias, for setting the scene, and also a very warm welcome from my side to everybody joining this session, and also a great thank to ABA to inviting me to have this short session. As Mathias already mentioned, we have a very unique funding scheme in Austria, also including an indirect funding tool called the R&D research premium. Why is it indirect? Because it is held via the Austrian tax law, so it is an indirect tax funding for R&D work performed in Austria. And as Mathias mentioned, and that's the very unique position in Austria, you receive a 14% R&D premium in the form of a cash back or as an actual cash grant. So the Austrian Federal Ministry of Finance grants you 14% cash back on all R&D spent over 1 year. And why is that unique? Because it is open to any company performing R&D in Austria, irrespective of its legal form. So irrespective if it is a limited liability company, if it is a partnership, or if you're even a foreign company with a permanent establishment in Austria and performing R&D through this Austrian permanent establishment. And the second point why it is that unique, because it is a refundable tax credit. What that means, in case the R&D tax premium exceeds the Austrian tax liabilities, the amount exceeding the tax liabilities is fully refundable, which is not the case in many other countries. So also in loss-making years, you can still profit from that Austrian research premium that may be refunded. And what are now the criteria to receive this R&D premium in Austria? So from a technical perspective, and that's why it is that unique and also that well known, the technical basis for applying for the R&D tax premium in Austria is the OECD First Getting Manual. So you have an internationally accepted standard, which is forming the basis for an Austrian indirect R&D funding, which is well known all over the world, and there is a common understanding what is R&D and what is not R&D. And with regards to the eligible costs, you may claim the R&D tax premium for any R&D related costs that incur over 1 fiscal year. So that includes personal expenses for or labor expenses, any direct expenses for your R&D projects, including materials as well as overhead. And then there is the third point, which is making it that unique in the world. You can also claim the R&D tax premium for any CapEx you're investing in Austria with regards to R&D. So for example, if you set up a R&D center in Austria, which will perform R&D in the following years, you can include the full CapEx, so not any depreciation, but the full CapEx into the cost basis for claiming the R&D tax premium in Austria. So just giving you a brief overview how this works in Austria. So there's a two-line process. You apply for the R&D tax premium after the end of the fiscal year with the responsible tax office on the one hand, and the second one for the technical evaluation. It's also including the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, FFG, where you apply for a technical evaluation of your projects. And as you can see, this process is very streamlined and very simple, because for any project you're describing to the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, there is just a space of 1.5 pages. So a very streamlined and simple process. Therefore, in normal cases, from my experience, it lasts up to 4 months, and you have you receive the cash grant credited on your account. And just to give you a short overview on eligible activities and topics you can include into the Austrian Research Premium. As I mentioned earlier, it is based on the OECD Frascati manual, so more or less on an internationally accepted R&D standard. Therefore, it is not required that you are performing basic research in Austria, like the universities do. Also, industrial development and applied research can be included into the claims for the Austrian R&D premium. On the slide, you can see some examples listed, which may be eligible for the R&D premium in Austria. Going very simply, it is product development, but it is also going to automation. It is going to process developments for new manufacturing processes, manufacturing technologies. And Mathias presented some cases that invested in Austria, also with regards to R&D. And sometimes also the R&D tax premium is one of the major, a strong argument why investing in Austria for R&D works. So in case any questions, so I hope I gave you a short and brief overview on the Austrian R&D premium. And in case any questions come up, you can see my contact details and do not hesitate to reach out.
Can I just pop a question there, please? Many countries offer R&D incentives. What would you say is the USP of the Austrian scheme? In just one short answer, please.
There are three major reasons why it is that unique. The first one is that the application process is that streamlined, that it is very simple. The second one is that it is based on the OECD Frascati manual, so that you have an internationally agreed standard on the type of R&D. And the third one, which is really a major advantage compared to other countries, is that you can also include R&D capex, and that the R&D premium is refundable and not only based on a super deduction like in other countries.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Laure, for your insights. Thank you.